Hello, and welcome to the Digital Workspace Works podcast. I'm Ryan Purvis, your host, supported by our producer Heather Bicknell. In this series, you'll hear stories and opinions from experts in the field, stories from the front lines, the problems they face and how they solved them, the areas they focused on from technology, people and processes, to the approaches they took that will help you to get to the grips with the digital workspace inner workings.
How are you today?
I'm good. I had to switch to the new teams again, and I could have sworn it made me switch to the new teams again last time. So just on a never-ending journey, I guess.
I was gonna say, yeah, we never win with Teams. But hey, what can we say? It's the only integrated option, really. Think about it. So,
That is true. That's where they get you, I guess.
and my wife's obviously running Windows and I run Mac, and she asked me to come help her the other day with something, and I didn't know what to do. I was like, this is so different. So it's not even a consistent experience. I mean, there's some commonalities, but it's just different how Mac OS is going this way and Windows 11 is going that way.
How's your intranet today?
Oh, it's still a
Your
nightmare.
internet. Yeah.
So I've been with British Telecom for a while, but it's always been a grudge purchase because they're quite expensive. And there's a stupid thing, and South Africa does it as well, where you have to have a telephone line and pay for a telephone line, even if you don't use it. It's part of some governmental legislation or something. So for the last 4 years, I've paid £15 a month for a telephone line that I don't use. So it's not nothing, it's a couple of cups of coffee a month. Call it £1,000 over 4 years wasted on nothing. So when I went and upgraded my phone, I went and upgraded my phone to get the USB-C because I just gave up trying to do Thunderbolt or whatever it is. They were doing a really good deal with Vodafone broadband, like 30%. I get 30% off on my phone contracts, which is substantial. That basically pays for the phone. And then when I got the price for Vodafone broadband, it was like half the price of British Telecom, BT. I said, do it. Makes sense. And I'm getting, and that's I'm going from a 300 meg line to a 1 gig line, basically 950 or 990, whatever it is. But when we did the switch over on Tuesday, it's just been an endless disaster. So what happens is, and I'm on my 4G now, I'm not even on my broadband, because what happens is I get 900 and it basically scales down to 0 and it comes back up to 900. It scales down to 0. So every time I do a speed test, I either get 900 or I get some permutation below that, and then I get 0 and it just drops. So I've had OpenReach out. So OpenReach basically looks after the entire network in the UK. They've tested my line. My line is perfect. Like, they basically go to the ideal is minus 13 decibels of noise on the line. Mine's like minus 16. That's how close it is to the perfect rating. So the line's fine. And I just think it's the router they gave me. The router's just dodgy. So ironically, what I'm going to do after I speak to you, I'm going to interview after this, I'm going to take my British Telecom box and I'm going to replace the login details in the British Telecom box with my Vodafone box and plug that in and see if it fixes the stability problem. Because otherwise I'm going to wait for it. And I'm going to be away next week, so I can't afford the family not to have internet. I'll get lynched.
Yes.
So yeah, it's just one of those things. In fact, I've got another router in the shed. This is why technology guys never throw stuff away, because you never know when you need a backup router. And it's not like the Wi-Fi unit they gave me was any better. It also has a dead spot. So, I've got 2 mesh networks. I've tried 2 different mesh networks. No, definitely not the mesh networks. Although my Eero, which is the Amazon Wi-Fi, which is supposed to be like a really high grade thing, really doesn't work with this network. So it's like the amount of hours that I've wasted trying to solve this problem, and I can tell you now, it's just the router that's a problem. It makes me want to cry.
Oh no.
I mean, I've now made them send me a 4G card backup router, hotspot router plug-in. Because I said to them, it's ridiculous that what should have been a simple box switch. I know I'm moaning and whining a bit, but you think in this day and age that you should be able to literally unplug and plug in, and there should be and you see, the problem is because of my background and building self-healing machines, my expectation is that the router should be smart enough now that when it plugs in and goes, hang on, I've got problems, it should already be able to fix itself, or at least notify them. And I was chatting to the guy who came to do the thing, and he said, yeah, like technically you could do it, but then there's no service industry. because he gets paid every time he gets called out. And, you know, there's money to be made across the line. So there's a point where actually someone doesn't want to automate it because they would take away someone's livelihood. And it's an interesting thing, because I was reading your article around the AI for the CEO thing, and it's probably why it won't happen, because someone at that level will say, I don't want to be replaced by an AI because I'm earning millions of bucks as a CEO. And, they would stop it at every point, like just to a point. And I was chatting to someone else at DeepMind about this. I'll talk a bit about it, but I mean, maybe get your thoughts before I go down a ramble.
No, and I thought this was an interesting. So I guess there was a bit of a survey or some research done asking CEOs how much of their job they thought could be automated away by, the latest wave of AI. And I think it was 50% of CEOs said, like around half of CEOs said something like, a large part of my job could be automated. So then it spurred all these headlines about the AI CEO.
So it's interesting because the guy that I was chatting to, I attended the Google FinTech annual event, was it a week ago? Yeah, a week ago Thursday. Really good event. I mean, I'm very impressed. Like if I compare like Microsoft, Google, and Amazon events that I've been to, I'm really enjoying the Google experience. I'm not saying that they necessarily are perfect or better or whatever it is, but I'm just really enjoying, like, it's a really high performing team that we're working with. They're really great people. So it's like wherever you go, it's like seeing your buddies at the event and having a great time, and you're still doing good business, Anyway, so one of the guys they had on there, he brought up this thing about he's writing a book, and he's now using Gemini to help him do the research and all the rest of it. So I was chatting to him afterwards via LinkedIn, and just saying, like, because the question I wanted to ask, but I was at the back and it was difficult to get a microphone, is do you see using an AI as cheating, or do you see it as something that is necessary? If you're not, it's not so much a choice anymore. Like, I think you have to be using something, because if you're not, everyone else is going to be using it around you. And it's the same sort of concept of, well, while everyone else is sleeping and I'm working, I'm getting ahead of you. And I mean, I know there's diminishing returns, but if you set up your AI stuff correctly, you shouldn't have any diminishing returns really, because you should be able to get the sleep you need because your AI is doing all the work. And this goes back, 20 years of doing this. I've always tried to find ways to automate stuff while I'm sleeping. I used to have machines when I was at JP Morgan. I used to have a persistent VDI, a non-persistent VDI, and a laptop, and all three of them were doing stuff all the time, just so I could keep going. And what we were discussing is, like, at some point, the co-creation piece of using your AI will come into it. Like, you write the bullet points, it writes the story. Now, it also writes a story in your voice. And you're just giving it guidance, or like he's using it for research. I do the same thing. I use it for research. Like, I did some requirements for a marketplace thing that we're going to build. We're not going to build the whole thing. We just needed to sort of set it out. And I wrote a couple of things that I expected it to do, and then it expanded on all that stuff for me, for stuff I hadn't thought of. And that's, it took me probably 15 minutes to write my initial list. Then it gave me a list. I spent like another hour refining that list and expanding it and just repeating it. Now, at some point, that refinement and that improvement stuff won't necessarily be necessary, because the AI itself will determine that it hasn't given you enough information, or that its own accuracy is not good enough, and it'll go and research and stuff. So when I read your article, I was laughing in some respects, because often your biggest role as a CEO, and I mean, bear in mind, I've only been a CEO of small businesses, never big corporates, but I always think about any role I've had as you are a CEO of your own team, your own thing. Yeah, that's what leadership is. Just at some point it has to get to the top, that someone's one throat to choke, as the saying goes. A lot of what you're doing is basically taking information from various people, synthesizing it to where the strategy of the business is going, and making decisions. And the faster you can do that, I wouldn't say the better the result, but the better you can move to be in the better position, because you're constantly looking for better positions, be it to generate more revenue or be more efficient or whatever the goals are. And why wouldn't you use an AI for that? And I mean, the thing that came up in that sort of conversation is, if you read all these sci-fi books, my mom actually bought me a beautiful science fiction book, 100 Stories of AI. And a lot of books I read are all AI. AI is a part of everything. And it's synonymous with, just doing stuff for you at scale. And I think with the volume of data we have coming at us all the time, you need something to synthesize the data into something manageable for you.
I think, it's interesting. There's everything's an assistant right now, right? When it comes to AI. And I think that's definitely where I could see a lot of the CEO, I suppose, use cases going, is there were some interesting comments in that article about sort of AI's ability to be more objective or dispassionate, or kind of like imagine it as an advisor that, isn't as biased, I suppose, to the parts of your business. Although obviously whatever information you're feeding in, it's going to get, the bias of whatever intakes it has. So I think we're probably a ways off from, the ability to fully replace that role. I think I like the article because, usually when we talk about automation taking jobs, right, it's more like menial labor or low paid jobs, like what we consider like low skilled jobs, right? But we're talking about replacing like high level knowledge work with the latest wave of AI. So I don't think CEOs should be, immune to that, right? If it's going to impact everyone else. So there's kind of like like turn it on its head, a little bit of a factor there as well, I think. So will CEOs, embrace it and use it in that way? But then there's also like, you mentioned one throat to choke, like there needs to be accountability and risk management at the end of the day. You can't, make a really poor business decision and just point to the AI and say, well,
Well,
they told me to do it.
yeah, and if you watch, TV is always a good way to suss out what's been thought about. So like you look at your average TV show, like an NCIS. I watched something the other day. This is one of these recent episodes where there was an errant AI that had been set up, and it basically, I think it might be NCIS, it might be something else, where the AI triggered a drone to go and kill somebody because the computer said yes, through its own logic determination. Actually, sorry, it wasn't NCIS. It was a movie with Russell Crowe, and there was still an operator, but there was a thing that went wrong, etc. Anyway, so and then there was another movie with that singer Jennifer called
Lawrence
Atlas.
or
No,
Jennifer
not Lawrence, the singer.
Lopez.
Hispanic.
Jennifer
Lopez, yeah,
Lopez.
it's called Atlas.
Okay.
And that was actually really, acting aside, the story was quite good, because this was an android that basically convinced her as a child to release the programming locks to allow him to learn. And he basically became a crazed maniac AI, escaped the planet. It was quite a futuristic thing. And she obviously was, and this guy, I don't want to give the whole story away, but there was some personal tragedy, and there's a whole like circle back to her, typical hero's story. But I quite liked the way they did the AI, with the AI actually had a sense of humor. It was sentient to an extent. It learned, but it still had constraints, in the right ways. And I think that's the point, is you've got to have some sort of constraints that you can let this thing out, but it's got to hit the size of the box at some point to say, well, I can't do that, I can't do this. So look at the three laws that Asimov had. The first one is you can't harm a human, but that's an easy thing to say, but in the simple terms. But if you think about the complexity of that, if it's a locomotive going down a railway line, and if it takes the left one, it kills a baby. If it takes the right one, it kills 12 people.
Trolley problem.
How does it decide? The trolley problem. I couldn't remember what it was called. Yeah, exactly. So I think it's not as, I don't see maybe in a short term a CEO being replaced by an AI, but a CEO that doesn't use AI will be replaced by a CEO that does use AI of some form. I think that's going to happen. And I think the hordes of people doing PowerPoint presentations will be replaced by AIs that do PowerPoint presentations. I think that's going to happen pretty quickly. And I think it comes back to that concept of value. You as a human need to add value, and how you add the value will be really about what tools you add and what you bring to the party. And being able to assess the results from your AI to how suitable they are to what you're doing, that's going to be the skill. And how you prompt, and I don't necessarily believe that there's a thing for prompt engineering per se. I think that's a bit of I don't think that's a real role. Much the same way as, we had Scrum Masters as a role for a long time. And actually, if you talk to most people, Scrum Masters actually isn't a role. It's a capability you have. Being a prompt engineer is a capability that you have, unless you're writing really complicated ones. But that's such a small niche, and it's an unsolicited opinion. I've done no research on that. But I think the ability for you to sit down in front of ChatGPT and write a good prompt to make it generate what you want, it's the same as writing code. You'd have to be able to structure your code in a good way. I think that's a skill that everyone will have to have. And I think that's something that, they should be teaching in school already, because that'll give you capabilities. There's something else I wanted to mention. Lost track of it now. I don't know. It'll come to me as you talk.
While you're thinking about it, yeah. I'll let you cook on that. Just made me think the prompt engineering piece and the potential ability for that to be a service or even part of some like executive assistant role. Just thinking about how there are, I think this was one of our podcast episodes, right? A a business writer who would ghostwrite for CIOs or, that sort of a service, like help them turn their ideas into compelling copy. I could imagine a sort of assistive role to executives who, maybe they're not like there's some still with the tools, like, the ability to know what to ask it right helps you get better outputs out of it. So someone who had that could, develop a niche where they provide that as some sort of service, or maybe be an interesting one for like a chief of staff or, any other kind of role that deals
Well,
with executives like that to be able to do that.
I mean, if you look at building your own GDP, and I know you need to run in a few minutes, but if you look at your own GDP, and I mean, I create a few of these every so often where there's a whole bunch of information that I have. I put it into my GDP so I can ask questions on it. So really, what you need as someone leading a team or a business, whatever, is you need some way to get to the answer quickly. Now, what happens typically is you ask a person. So my QA team, I ask QA head, what's going on? How many bugs you got? What's the priority bugs? Whatever. Now they will have gone through a process where they've captured bugs, they've marked the priority, they've marked the severity, they have steps to reproduce, all that stuff. That's been captured mostly manually at some point. Now your AI could in theory help down the road in categorizing and all that kind of stuff, because it creates a knowledge pattern around what's coming through. But what becomes useful for me as the leader in this case is, instead of me asking the person each time what's I think, is I just talk to my AI and say, every morning at 7 o'clock, I want to report in a tabular form that tells me this information. And it's going to be consuming that data every day automatically and just answering that question every day for me. Or in the middle of a meeting, I'm just, because think about those fire drills. You're sitting in a meeting and you need to know something. So you ping your person in Teams to ask them the question. They go around and, they change the context to go find the information to come back to you. But ideally what you want as an organization is, and this is where Microsoft's probably go with Copilot and the common data model, is your ability to ask questions of all your data in your organization and get an answer, and have that structured and unstructured data combined together into something useful. Now, how closely would that be useful? I don't know, but I think that's the ideal, is that everything should be at your fingertips. Now, the problem with that is, I think it's to create a level of anxiety, because at some point, someone has to make sure the data is correct. And, you're going to, my worry is that whenever you get a response back, there's never a accuracy score that goes with that. So it never says this is 100% accurate. It just says, this is what I know. And I think that's still where you're going to need the people to go and say, well, that doesn't make sense to me. You said it's 5 out of 10, but I think that's closer to 2 out of 10, whatever it is. Or we're not seeing that in the market, so the data might be wrong. So trusting the data in that respect is going to be, as it is already. I don't think that problem changes. I think it's already like that.
That is a really interesting conundrum that a lot of organizations have really messy data today, or disconnected data. And, maybe to no fault of the AI, right? If you're not, you're exposing it to what is the facts, but even though internally as an org, you might know we don't fully trust our data.
Well, I mean, you look at distributed systems and having everything, like, would you put all your data in Microsoft or Google or AWS? I mean, can you put all your data in one place? Because in order for that stuff to work, and we had the same problem when you were doing all the self-healing desktops and stuff, you had to put all the data in one place at some point to process it. And even if you're processing it distributed, some level of the output of that processing has to be shared centrally, to create the commonalities and for causation and causality and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of nodes that have to be trusted. And this is why I think blockchain is so interesting in some respects, because that is distributed ledgers, and distributed ledgers kind of make sense to solving some of these problems, but then it's the speed of how long it takes to replicate those ledgers to confirm the trust. So, I mean, it's just interesting. I mean, it's interesting how the technology is moving, and how as much as we solve some problems, we create brand new ones.
Yeah. There's another layer to that as well that I heard about the other day. I mean, I think, anyway, kind of explored in my mind for the first time, which is the sort of permissioning that goes with enterprise AI as well. So, access to data, how does the model, as you're the one interacting with it, know what you have access to, what you don't have access to? How is it, pulling from some things out of others?
Yeah, I mean, when we built the enterprise search for SharePoint back in the day, I mean, we had to build all that stuff in, because, you might not have access to that workspace, but when we're searching, we know the result exists in that workspace. So you're looking for the HR policy for laptops, but it's sitting inside the HR area you don't have access to. Now, what do you do with that? Do you allow that person access to see the document? Do you tell the person who owns that area that Ryan is looking for this document and you need to grant him access, or publish something in an open space? There's a whole lot of workflow that kind of kicks off from there. But I mean, we're just doing intelligent search. And in some respects, the generative AI world is just intelligent search. And I don't know, oversimplifying it, because large language models are a little bit more sophisticated than that. But they are basically based on the thesaurus of information. But it's interesting because, the bigger the more people you have involved, the greater the complexity and network effect that you've got to deal with. And commissioning is one of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you remember the thing that you wanted to discuss? I feel like you put a pin in something earlier too, but no worries if not. I want to give you a chance.
I can't remember. I mean, it was around the AIs, and I think it was around how everyone's very focused on generative AI, but actually, I think it's actually the other things are more interesting. The computer vision ones and still machine learning is still the most interesting one. Pattern recognition. If you look at what a CEO often is, just going to make the article quickly. CEOs are typically pattern recognition people. They've done this before somewhere. They've seen the pattern. So they hire the right people that can solve those patterns that they're seeing. So turnaround business or a growth business or a merger and acquisition. Those are just, I want to say they're just patterns. I mean, I oversimplify them. But that's why when you hire a person for a role, you're typically looking at the industry of expertise plus what they've seen before and how much have they failed. I always like to hire people that have failed because they know how to recover. People that never failed never know how to recover.
Wise words. And good food for thought as we wrap here. But interesting chat about the AI CEO. I would love to dig in more about your thoughts on machine learning and other forms next time.
Sure. That sounds good. Thanks, Heather. Catch you later.
Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Heather Bicknell is our producer and editor. Thank you, Heather, for your hard work on this episode. Please subscribe to the series and rate us on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Follow us on Twitter @the DWW Podcast. The show notes and transcripts will be available on the website www.digitalworkspace.works. Please also visit our website www.digitalworkspace.works and subscribe to our newsletter. And lastly, if you found this episode useful, please share with your friends or colleagues.